Oh, all right. I'm on with Tom. We finally hit record. We've been talking for like a half hour. Um, it's time we talk. I didn't do the theme song. I don't remember the theme song.
Dun, 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 dun. I don't know either.
I'm with Tom. That works.
There's no joints, so it's nobody cares anyway.
So I gotta say, JP was actually not okay with me calling it joints with
I
JP.
don't think he had ever heard of a Spike Lee joint, which
No.
is clearly where you were going.
Oh, it was really funny. And then I actually chat GPT'd it to see if they would give me a different name. And the first name chat GPT came up with was a JP joint.
That's because your computer is listening to you and recording everything.
Oh, 100%. And I approve. I want better service for my computer. So please listen to all the things.
But here's the thing. They should know when I've bought the thing they advertise, so they should stop advertising the thing because I've bought the thing.
That is true. It's like Instagram starts showing me advertisements for movies after I've purchased the ticket for the movie. I'm like, no, I saw it. You don't have to advertise it to me.
That's why you have the
I
data
saw it.
point.
Yeah, you should know. Oh man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's unnaturally hot here in New Hampshire, which is still cooler than the rest of the country.
Yeah.
But it is yeah,
Yeah.
balmy. But school's back in session for both kids, which makes my day a little bit more normal each day, and just trying to get lots of stuff done.
I do like normality. It is nice. And you have a bookstore. I work from home in my basement. So
Yeah.
people think this is my full-time job. The dialogue doctor is not my full-time job. It's actually something I just do at nights. But I have a full-time job, but I do get to do that job from my basement, often in pajama pants. Which my wife is like, you need to start dressing again. COVID is over. I'm like, why? Today I had on a polo top. I had to talk to clients, so I had on a nice top and sweatpants. That's my that's my life now.
The whole story hypothesis thing with JP was great, except the word hypothesis, which I can't seem to get out clearly.
I'm really excited
Um,
about it. I think he's really onto something. It's good. Yeah.
on that's I mean, it's um less than onto something new. He's onto a way to explain it to an author who is maybe in their first book or
Yeah.
second book. He's explaining concepts that we often talk about, but I just hadn't heard it that clearly.
Yeah.
It's very easy to follow. It makes sense, and it allows you. It's kind of like I often talk about joining the character's flaw to the climax or the finale,
Yeah.
right? Like deepening that finale by connecting the flaw to it. And he does the same sort of thing with like inciting incident
Yeah.
and sort of three-act structure. I don't think he ever said three-act structure, but you could almost see the three different phases of the hypothesis
Yeah.
lining up with the act structure.
He and I have talked a lot about it post like the book is being released. He does say 3-act structure in the book. We've talked a lot about it, about how like for every act you could actually add a need, which is an interesting, like a false need, a need that's a failed attempt, which is an interesting concept. And he and I are putting together a workbook right now that takes somebody from like zero to having 30 chapters done in 60 days. And we're using the story hypothesis to do that. And it's he has it outlined how you can do it in 3x pretty easily. Like he's kind of aligned it with both the hero's journey and the heroine's journey and like how it works out. So I'm excited. I think it's a good. I'm excited that he came up with it. It's like somebody once told me that teaching isn't revealing new material, it's finding um, helpful ways to explore complicated concepts that have always been around. And I feel like that's what he's done. It feels good.
That's why I love
Yeah.
Seth Godin so much.
Yeah, he's yeah. And he's been saying the same thing for like 30 years. He just
Yeah,
keeps saying it
but
in different ways. Yeah.
he loves to start really esoteric and then just bring it down to something that makes absolutely perfect applicable sense, right? Like,
100%. Yeah.
so how do he always says like, so how do we use this? Or so
Yeah.
what does this mean to us? And
What is this? Why do we care?
yeah.
Yeah, I will say with Go, there's certain teachers that I followed for decades and I love their work, but I go through phases in which I'm mad at them. And I'm not necessarily mad because they've done anything or said anything wrong, because they don't even know who I am. I'm mad because they've taught me something that I know is true, but I don't want to confess to.
Yes.
So then I just ignore their work for a little while because I'm a
Like, stop
petulant.
making crap.
Yeah, I'm a petulant child. So I'm just like, shut up, Seth Godin. You don't know what you're talking about. So I just stop listening for a little bit.
Oh, it's like Seth Godin means I just ship as soon as I'm ready. Like,
Yeah,
you're
just
like,
ship it. Ship it.
no,
Yeah.
no. If you listen to him, it means stop making crappy things.
Yeah. Did you read his newest book?
No,
Oh man, that's the one that pissed me off.
I've just been listening to Akimbo for a couple of years now.
Okay, his newest book is really great. It's about bees. Um, well, that's his
Bees are
illustration,
awesome. Yeah.
is bees.
But
And he talks about it's all about AI and building things in a new age. And he talks about how like quality and personhood matters now more than ever. And I got mad at him and I was like, I don't want to hear this. And so I've stopped listening for 3 months.
but that's no different than what Joanna has been saying,
I
or
know.
Jay, or any of the people we
I
like
know.
that
It
we
makes me
follow.
mad that none of
Um,
them will give me what I want,
because
which is
yeah,
this is going to be easy now.
I mean, well, not even easy, but like, I don't want to engage.
Yeah.
Like, I write with a pen name. I don't want to be a genuine personality in the virtual world.
Yeah.
I want to be a
I,
genuine personality to my friends and family in the real world. But
yeah. I will say Becca Syme has an interesting take. I was listening to a podcast. I'm getting ready to interview her. So I was listening to a podcast. I've listened to like 15 of her podcasts. I don't know if she listens to this or not. If she does, I'm just going to let her know. Man, it's impossible to build a bio on her. Like when I interview somebody, I spend a lot of time like listening to what they've said. I usually read several of their books. I like, because I want to have a genuine, I don't want to just ask them like, so tell me about what you do. Like I want to have a
right.
genuine conversation about what they're doing. And the community is great because I can always ask the community like, hey, like the dialoguer community, like, hey, what do you want to ask them? I asked today, what do you want to ask Becca? And I got like 15 questions.
Yeah, which is great.
And some of them are super deep. I'm like, oh, woo. I don't like one of them. I was like, I don't even know what that question means. I have to go do more research.
Yeah.
But I will
Well,
say
did you see mine?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
She's the hardest person I've ever researched. She is her online profile is so manicured. It's very tough to find out things about her. So
Well, my question was like, what's her fiction catalog look like?
yeah,
And not to cast aspersions, but because I feel like this pattern, as I'm still trying to carve time for my own creative writing,
yeah,
even though, we've come to the conclusion that there's no business sense in doing that compared to author services, which makes sense. But
oh, now I have to stop listening to you too,
I
Tom. I'm
know,
just
but
kidding.
most of us started author services to sort of support our creative writing, but
Yeah, until the fiction takes off.
it very quickly takes over though.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, she's a person I want to stop listening to because it's like, you and your Clifton strengths, I contain multitudes. You can't tell me exactly what my
that's right.
personality is.
Yeah.
Not that I'm 5 out of my top 6 are green strategic, which
Oh,
really tells you everything you need to know about me,
that's right.
which
Yeah,
it makes me furious.
I finally did hear her talk about her publishing history, but I had to listen to a podcast she did with her mom, and I had to get to like back in 2014. Like that's how deep I went. I was listening to episodes from 2014 to figure out what her publishing history was.
Well, I was
Yeah.
listening to the one you suggested because it sounded like you were going to talk about it later, and um, so many good things in it, but
Oh,
about the
it's a
golden
great
age of
interview.
things. But the real like poignant thing for me was the host. I can't remember his name, but talking about just missing that um gold rush, which it
Yeah,
was me exactly, right? Like I
me
put
too.
my first book out there in 2018, and Johnny, Sean, and Dave were like, "You just gotta keep doing this, and you'll be fine." And I'm
Yeah,
like, "Great!" And then you just watching it
yep,
change and learning how to do. I got really good at AMS ads for my clients for both fiction and nonfiction, and then
yeah,
all of a sudden the cost per clicks just made it
yeah. Just took
impossible,
off. Yeah,
right? Like it just,
yeah, just
this
soared.
doesn't work unless you're getting, I was getting like 10, 11 cents a click in 2019.
Yeah,
And now, it's $1.50
yeah.
per click. It doesn't work.
That interview, by the way, is on the subscription. If because I know you and I forget that people are listening to this.
Yeah.
That's on this, which is part of the reason I love talking to you. That is on the subscription for authors podcast.
Which is fascinating that there is a
I,
whole podcast on subscription for
I
authors.
didn't even know. I totally listening to that podcast now. I didn't even know it existed.
I
I was looking for information on Becca Syme. Um, I was stalking Becca, and I found subscription for authors. But yeah, it's she interviewed with them in June of
Mhm.
this year, and it is a fantastic interview. It's great. If you
Yeah,
get
it
a
was
go
great.
listen to that. Yeah, and the hosts were like, I love it when interviewers are prepared and they clearly know who they're talking to and what they want to talk about, and that is my favorite.
I
Um,
like it the other way around too, where quite often you'll get an author who's like, "And what do you do on this podcast?" Like they clearly they don't know where they are,
like, what
right?
is going on? Yeah, especially like big name authors who are clearly doing the tour. They're like,
Yeah.
so wait, who are you guys? Yeah,
Yeah.
what are we doing here?
And she
Yeah,
didn't do that. She talked a lot about Patreon, which was really
yeah, yeah.
interesting,
She was
especially the
prepped.
idea that there are people out there who will just support you because they want you to write more. Because the whole thing with subscription services to me is that like I cannot consistently produce,
Yeah,
right, and subscription really relies on like
on regular production.
consistently
Yeah,
producing, right? You can't do 3 books one year and then no books the next year.
yeah.
And
I
then
actually, I actually started a secret Patreon this year. Did I talk to you about this?
no, but it's hard to get people to sign up for they don't know it's there.
Yeah, but that was the problem.
There was a
No,
bit
I
of a
started what
conceptual error there.
I told my newsletter about it. I
Oh,
didn't tell anybody else. Um, I had this plan. I was going to write a ongoing series in which a reoccurring cast of characters talked to a chat GPT type bot, and the chat GPT
yes.
bot
I remember
answered
you
in the
saying you were
voice.
going to do that.
Yeah, had the inner voice of Vince Vaughn. I wrote 20 episodes, and then I was like, I'm tired of this, and so I stopped.
I'm tired of Chat GPT.
I was like, this isn't funny anymore. This was funny, but it's not going anywhere. This is dumb. And nobody was reading it. So it's like, I can stop this. I
Right.
don't need to do this
And
anymore.
that's her point too, is like, why are you doing it? Make sure you know why you're
Yeah.
doing it. Make sure
Yeah.
people want it.
Yeah. Nobody wanted my weird dialogues with a fake chat GPT. Um, all right. What are you working on right now?
I am working on my book 6 in my series, which I cavalierly threw up with the November 1 release date, which I've never done before.
Nice.
Before starting on
Okay.
July 1st. But it's
Ooh,
fine.
that's a
It's
tight
fine.
release date
It's
too. That's
fine. Um,
not...
like so many other things, it's motivated, strategically motivated in that it's book 6, and I want to then do the second box set, the second 4, 5, and 6 in the box set by the end of the year. And I also I've been wide for about 3 years,
Yeah.
and um, you know, I'm the opposite of everybody else. Like I'm gonna do KU, of course, right when KU's at its lowest
Yeah, I
point. But
was about to say great time.
doesn't matter. Yeah,
I gotta say, I jumped in June to
yeah.
KU, so
It's like,
I'm
oh,
with you.
maybe I'll just
Yeah,
um, just because I see some other people who, about half of their income is coming from KU, and I hate Amazon, obviously, but um, if half of my income is not coming from wide sources, then um, it's not serving me well. And I've, trust me, folks out there, come at me, but I've read all the things on how to build on other platforms, and a little bit of traction here and there, but just
It's tough.
not much. The main reason, honestly, the main reason I went why in the first place was to increase my chance of getting a book bub, and I haven't had one in like 18, 20 months, something like that.
I've
So
never gotten one.
um I someone on 20 books the other day was like, after like 5 years of
Yeah.
submitting monthly, they got one. Uh but yeah, so what I want to do is in in November, when the book 6 comes out, say, hey everybody, all of my books are on sale on the wide platforms, and they're all coming off at the end of November. So buy them now, which will give me like 3 sales.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
My mom will buy a couple.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna give KU a shot. So we'll see. Um, I am excited. There's this amazing thing coming up called the Dialogue Dash that
Well,
I'm gonna join. I have a major quibble from a marketing standpoint. How many days is it?
78,
How much does it cost?
$79.
Come on, man.
You know what's really funny?
How hard is it to put those two things together?
You know what's really funny is we thought it was 60 days. This is what's bad.
Oh,
JP and I and Laura were putting it together, and I'm like, okay, it's a 60-day program. And then I started counting the weeks, and I'm like, wait, this isn't 60 days. I'm literally putting the website together. I'm like, this isn't 60 days. This is 78 days. Why did we think it was 60 days? And then I was like, damn it, we agreed on $79 for 78 days.
yeah. You could change that.
You get
It's
one
not
day
too
for
late.
free. You get one
It's
day
like,
for free.
no, it's the other way
Oh no,
around.
it's the other way around. I get a day for free.
Right. Each day is like 99 and 2/10 of
Oh,
a cent.
yeah,
Uh,
I might go change it to $78. That
I
is
think you
really
should.
smart.
I
Yeah.
like that you put so many prep days though. I'm very big into sort of not necessarily full outline, but like having your characters and voices and major points in place. It just makes
Yeah.
your writing faster.
It's
It
yeah, my goal for it is twofold. I get a lot of people who do sessions with me. They've got a massive amount of world building, but they cannot start writing. And part of the problem is they're planning the wrong things. And so I have them in mind. And then there's a lot of people in our community, myself included, who are kind of stuck. Like we're like, I'm in the middle of a project and I'm just kind of frozen on it. Like I don't know what to do. So it's also with them in mind of like, hey, if we pause for a couple weeks and plan, it'll restart you. Even if you've
yeah.
already done the planning, it'll restart you. So yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
excited about it. That and Dialogue Con are the two things kind of keeping me going right now in a world of chaos. But
Yeah, you
which
realize
means I'm
those
gonna
are
fall
going to
apart.
be concurrent,
I
right?
know,
And you're
which
like,
means I'm gonna fall apart at the end of October. It's all over. Done.
there was a nice I'm sure by the time, if this ever airs, it'll be several weeks ago, but was it Deb that was just
Yeah, Deb
on?
Jensen was just on. This
Yeah,
actually airs on Monday. Interviews
that
go up
was
right after I do them.
uh that
Yeah.
was great.
Oh,
And
thanks.
one of the things you talked about was sort of um writing out of order, which I
Yeah.
never do. But I do plot the major plot points, and by
Mm.
the time you then get to the climax, it's almost always different.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a believer in over outlining because I don't know, just the sweet spot for me. Everyone's different. The sweet spot for me is, I write like 1,000 word chapters. They're short,
Mhm.
and in the outline, there's just one sentence for it. And
Nice.
so much crazy stuff happens while you're writing those 1,000 words. You're like, oh, I'm not even remotely where I thought I was going to be at the end of this chapter, and then
Yeah.
you just go with it. But
Yeah. My chapters tend to be like 2,000 to 3,000 words.
mhm.
But I do the same thing. I usually have one sentence for a chapter.
Mine are getting
It's the
shorter and
sentence.
shorter.
Are
I
they
mean,
really? Mine are getting longer.
I'm writing thriller, so um the but yeah, one of the things that you talked about, that you've talked about many times, but in that interview you also talked about how if you get the voices right, a lot of the plotting solves
Yeah, it'll
itself.
fix
You're
itself.
like, what's going to happen when these two people are in the same room? And
Yeah, if you
sort
just
of,
put them in the same room, you're like, oh. And a lot of times I find that like when I put two characters in a room, I'm like, oh, I didn't plot this, but this has to happen.
yeah,
This is how this has to go.
right. But also the idea, which I think is a little outside the box, the idea that um, you choosing which characters are going to, like, this has to, I want the vehicle character move this direction. Which characters are going to move them in that direction?
Yeah, I'm
I
surprised
think,
that's out of the box because
yeah,
that's how
because
I've always written.
I know, but when I outline, I'm like, okay, they're this scene and it's going to be with this person, and then I like,
Yeah.
then I make it work. So the idea that you're going to choose who's in the scene based on what you want, where you want that character to be pushed, is kind of
Yeah,
cool.
we're so plot heavy. We're so like, oh, these are my save the cat scenes, or these are my hero's journey, or these are my
Mhm.
heroine's journey. And we get those like plot arcs, and then we forget that like that's not actually what the reader cares about. I mean, it is. The plot has to work, but it's only part of the recipe. Like, there's other things that go into that recipe. Oh, yeah. Anyway. So you got book 6. Anything
Yeah,
else?
and a
Anything else on the
bunch of
horizon?
client work, but I'm going to
Okay.
do something completely new uh for the October thing.
Nice. For the
Different
dialogue
character.
con?
Yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
mean, like, why use the same series characters if the whole point is to build characters? And I have
Yeah.
all these random, wake up in the middle of the night or what, and like jot down synopsis kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I've got one that I'm sort of interested in doing. We'll see.
Nice. Yeah, I can't figure out. I'm going to start something new in October as well. I can't figure out what I'm doing yet. I have like 4 ideas and they're all like half formed. And all of them
I
make me a
know,
little
I know what
tired.
you have to do is the church cabin in the woods. What did you call it? You
The
remember? I made
church
you
retreat.
the church retreat.
The 4 ideas I have,
Do
none
it.
of them are those.
Oh, should be.
Oh man, I'd forgotten about that one.
Yeah,
Church retreat. Yeah.
it's a great idea.
Yeah. For anybody listening, I was applying for something and they wanted a pitch. So I wrote 7 pitches and then sent them to friends and was like, hey, which of these 7 do you like the best? And one of
And
them was a church retreat where somebody starts murdering everybody.
yeah, it was a classic cabin in the woods kind
Yes,
of
cabin in the
setup,
woods.
except it was, fundamentalists. So
Yes,
it's
from
great.
it was a mega church staff on a staff retreat. And they were all like big, huge versions of themselves. Yeah, I should probably go back to those pitches because I had 7 of them.
Yeah.
I don't I remember the one I looking back, the one I sent the people was maybe the worst one to send them. I'm so self-destructive. I don't know. I sent them the sad one.
I was like, I like these 2 or 3. You're like, yeah, I'm sending the other ones.
I'm sending the sad one. I was like, I have an image of Steve Carell crying over his wife's grave in my head. That's the pitch I'm sending them. Of course, they were like, no. Yeah. Anyway, but that's not until October. I have to finish a book by October 1st that
The
I've
memoir.
the memoir that I've rewritten 3 times now,
I didn't
and
want to bring it up.
I still hate it. Um, it's living in my file. I can't. I think I have. I'm about to rewrite it a 4th time, and I think the 4th time I have it. But I said that about the 3rd and the second
Well,
time.
I was going to ask, are you ever going to like it no matter what?
The
Or is this
problem,
something you're going to have somebody else look at and say, yeah, this version is the.
it's yeah, it's not that I don't like the writing. I like the stories. It's that it's not going anywhere, and I can't. And then it
Yeah.
starts going somewhere, and I'm like, oh, I don't like where this is going. And so,
That's why I hate
so,
that's
so
why
I
I hate
start over.
nonfiction.
Yeah,
Um,
because I keep going like, oh, I don't like where this is headed.
yeah.
This isn't fun. Yeah.
You need to pay Rachel to just straighten you out. Like,
Yeah,
Rachel, just give me
seriously.
an hour
Yeah,
because
fix
she'll
me.
she'll straighten you out like
Fix
that.
me. You know what the problem, and this 4th round, I realized I made it so heavy and depressing that I don't even want to write it. so I was like, I need to make it. This needs to be more fun, and it needs to be more fun. Not in that the topic of leaving institutional religion is fun, but it can. I can take myself less seriously in the process of writing this thing.
But
So
yeah, I mean that's playing to your strengths.
yeah,
Not just the comedy, but the comedy slash pathos, which is how comedy works
yeah, and so
best.
I need to make it more fun, and
Yeah.
that's the fourth rewrite is now it's
But you
going to be
don't but
fun.
you don't want to do a satire of, you don't want to be
No,
like, because it was a big part of your life.
yeah, no, I don't want to
Um,
make it funny.
right.
I just need to make it enjoyable. Yeah, Brennan, I don't know if you've ever encountered this book. There was a guy named Brennan Manning who wrote a book called Ragamuffin Gospel, and back in the 80s. It's a fantastic book. Um, he talks about he was I think he might have been an Episcopal priest, I don't remember, who was also a jazz player who had serious alcoholism. And it is a question of institutional religion type book. And he has these amazing stories in it that just rip your heart out. Like but then he parallels them with stories that are really funny. Like he has a story about being a kid in New York going to a baseball game, professional baseball game. I think he was going to see the Yankees, and on a Sunday, and somebody he wants to buy a hot dog, but it's Lent. So he's trying to decide if it's a mortal or venial sin to eat the hot dog. Because it's a venial sin, he'll just go to confession later and he'll be fine. But if it's a mortal sin, he'll go to hell. So he can't decide whether it's a mortal venial sin. So he ends up like asking one of his friends what sin. He takes a poll of all the people around him. It's really funny. But I was like, I want this to be less sad old bastard complaining and more David Sedaris.
Yeah.
So I have to go more David Sedaris.
Not yeah, and nobody wants advice when they're on round 5, but
No, I
like
take all the advice. Please give me advice.
like Sedaris, um, focusing on focusing on other people is a good way to get out of your own way.
Yeah, which is
Um,
something I need to do.
so
Yeah,
some good vignettes, because that's what he's sort of describes, these random connections
he's
and
the best.
conversations he has with people,
Yeah,
right? But there's always another person there. It's not just like, here's what I think.
yeah. We're gonna do a Sedaris. I think we might do Me Talk Pretty someday next year in the book club in the dialoguer Zoom calls because I don't talk enough about David Sedaris. I love David Sedaris. He's amazing. I've read every book he's ever written. He's so great.
He's
Um,
great.
yeah. Okay. Speaking of great stories, question number 2 of 7, best story you've consumed lately.
We're so slow.
I know.
Um,
We're 45 minutes in. How
I
long have
know.
we been
All right,
talking?
question
Yeah.
2 of
Question number
24.
2.
Just to belabor that, the thing about Sedaris is
You
that
can't go backwards.
yeah, I gotta, because it's dialogue. He he creates a voice that and tricks you into buying into that voice, even that though that voice has batshit crazy opinions.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And that's what's great
his
about it.
opinions are crazy.
His
Yeah.
opinions, and you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
David. And you're like, wait a minute, that's nuts, right?
Yeah.
So, I love that about him. Things we're excited about, media we're excited about.
Yo, yeah,
Deadlock,
best story Deadlock. Yeah.
D
You got me
D E
watching
A
Deadlock.
D L O C H. It's on Amazon Prime. Co-written by 2 seasoned comedy performers who wanted to know what would happen if you made Broadchurch a comedy. That was actually what their
And that is
mode.
what they did.
Yeah,
That
that's what
is
they did.
yeah.
I read an interview, and one of them was like, it was COVID. I had a kid. I had just had a baby. I was overworked. I turned on Broadchurch because everything I've seen Olivia Colman in was a comedy. And I kept thinking, when is this going to get funny? And you've seen Broadchurch.
Oh,
There
it's
is no
so
comedy.
heavy.
Oh my
It's so heavy.
God, it's so heavy, but it's fabulous. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great. But this is a like a 10 episode series that has definitely shades of Twin Peaks in that the tonality is all over the place. So 1 minute it's scary, 1 minute it's funny, all kinds of different funny. There's slapstick funny, there's wry funny. It's
Just
sat.
downright absurdism. There's
Yeah,
just it's sometimes it's just absurd.
yep. Somebody will suddenly like carry something across the screen because there's this festival going on at the same time as the serial killer. So there's people trying to put on like a women's liberation festival at the same time that they're trying to investigate this killer
Yeah.
who's killing men
Yeah.
as a
In a
nice
town
change of pace.
gentrified by lesbians.
Yes.
Which
Um,
you
um,
explain it, you're just like,
yeah.
yeah, it writes
Although the
itself.
the trailer is the trailer gets it pretty good.
Yeah.
The trailer maybe leans a little heavy on the comedy because there's quite a lot of parts that aren't as funny.
There's parts that are very serious.
Yeah, but there
Yeah.
are parts that are hysterical. And what I particularly loved, why I told Jeff he had to check it out was, um, and I'm going to talk about this on question 5A, but the everybody talks at once, and yet you have the main character, which is a bit of an uptight police chief,
Mhm.
um, a opposite of uptight, spazzy detective that's from out of town who just wants
Yeah.
to solve the case and leave.
And leave.
And then you have the constable who is incredibly earnest. And then you have the other constable who really doesn't care about being there,
Yeah.
but loves everybody. And
Yeah.
Sven
Very,
is
very
Sven is
happy with everybody.
fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sven likes everybody there. He's a good guy, but like he's not really up for doing any work. And those four voices together are often all talking on top of each other, and they're all distinct as can be.
And
Um,
often they're talking about completely different things.
yeah,
On top of
yeah, they're just talking right past each
they're just
other.
talking right past each other.
It's great.
Oh,
And a lot of time it's like Dulcie, the Eddie, who's the really sort of loud, crazy one, is just making pronouncements, and Dulcie's like, nope, actually, nope, nope,
yep.
that's not, nope. Um, just warning, there's certain words, swear words used in Australia much more
Oh yeah.
frequently than used here.
Yeah. Don't
Specifically
listen
the
to it
C
with
word,
children
which
around. Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Also a
but
lot of male nudity.
yeah, well, they're all
Yeah.
dead though.
They're all
Or
dead. A
are they
lot of
real?
naked corpses.
They could just be mannequins.
Yeah.
Um,
I say that because I was watching it in the kitchen and my 8-year-old
oh
walked in. I was
geez.
like, what are you watching? I had headphones in, so he couldn't
Yeah.
hear me. Like he couldn't hear it, but I also couldn't hear him coming. And he
Yep.
walked in, he was like, Daddy, what's that? I'm like, not for you. Yeah. Anyway.
Um, yeah, but I mean, anything you want to add to that? It's just like it's unique. It's a twist. It's smart.
I I part of what I was pondering when I was watching it, we're so going back to what Becca back earlier in the conversation, what Becca was talking about with like golden age of publishing, like tropes of the golden age of publishing being back on top of us now that the gold rush ended in like 2018. And you know, genre is so important in the gold rush era and like genre conventions. Something John Trudy says in The Anatomy of Genre is you can't stick to a single genre anymore. You have to combine genres. And so my brain as a consumer of the story was 100% in. My brain as a writer was like, this shouldn't work.
Yeah.
But it works so well. And so I pondered that a lot around like, why does this work? It works so well.
The
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still think from a indie ebook marketing standpoint, it's very hard to be in two genres. You just have to pretend that you're in one and go after
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah.
and go for the thriller writers who happen to like a little bit of comedy, uh, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but what mixing genres lets you do is breathe new life into something. I mean, a major through line of Deadlock is the mismatched partners
Yeah.
trope, right? Like I don't know how far have you watched.
I'm about halfway through.
Yeah, you know Dulcie and Eddie are going to end up
Oh yeah.
working
Yeah.
together, right?
100%. Yeah.
Even though at the
It's
beginning they
yeah.
can't stand each other.
Yeah.
It's a trope, you know it's coming, but it's you get to watch it play out in a different way because they've mashed up
Yeah.
these genres.
Yeah. It reminds me of the first time I watched Fleabag. Because
Yeah,
Fleabag's
oh, I
another
love
one of
Fleabag.
those that's like very genre bending. You're watching it, you're like, what genre am I in? Is this satire? Is this because it's very heavy? Like the the underlying component of Fleabag, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but the underlying thing that's driving the narrative that you don't know about till you get closer to the end is extremely heavy. And the lead character is very funny. Fleabag is very funny and very ironic and very charming and all of these things. And until you realize she has some serious mental health problems. And
Yeah.
like but it's another one of those genre bending, like especially season two. In season two, you're like, wait, is this a romance? Is what is happening in this show? Yeah.
If any listener, if there are any listeners, if there's any listeners, if you've never seen the very first episode of Fleabag, it's one that I love to point people to. Again, fairly explicit from a language standpoint,
Yeah.
but everyone points to it because of the fourth wall breaking, which
Yeah.
is great. I
It's
love it.
brilliant. Yeah.
It's brilliant because usually the fourth wall is broken to give the audience information that they don't have, but she breaks it to basically lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
The information she gives to the audience is pretty much her version of things, which reminded me a little bit of Little Thieves, the
Yeah.
book that we read. But what
100%.
I love about the first episode is that um because she's also the writer, she has taken the inciting incident and she's removed it and she's put it at the end,
Uh-huh. Yeah, you
which you see in
discover it as you
murder
go.
mysteries sometimes,
But
but you
not, and that's what I'm
rarely
saying.
see
It's a
in a
genre
dramatic
bender.
comedy,
Yeah.
right? Like you spend the whole episode thinking she is screwed up, and then you get to the end, you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. The thing that I I knew it was brilliant when I was watching it. The thing that like floored me was in season two, she breaks the fourth wall and then a character notices.
Right. Who are you talking to?
Yeah. And and it's so artfully done and it's so perfect for it's so authentic to the character that notices. You're just like, that was brilliant. Like I don't, and you totally don't see it coming. You're not prepared for it. He's
Right. She's
you're
been doing it
just
for a season and a
she's been
half.
doing it
So
for a season and a
yeah.
half, and then all of a sudden they're having a private conversation, and she does it, and usually time freezes, and you can see him in the background like watching her. It's like, who are you talking to? It's like, oh my gosh. And then you start to wonder, like, wait, does everybody see it? And no, and nobody said anything.
Who
Like, yeah,
knows?
it's
All
crazy.
right. But that's
Um,
not your pick. You have something else.
yeah, I have something else. I read a monster of a book, uh, The Parrot and the Igloo by David Lipsky. Have you heard of this book yet?
I have it at the store. I haven't read it.
It is
I don't read much nonfiction, actually.
it is it's broken into three parts. The first part tells you about the invention of electricity and the industrial age. The second part tells you about uh climate science and the scientists who have debated climate change starting in the late 1800s all the way to the early 2000s. And the last section talks to you about the gas and oil industry, and very much in kind of like a Philip Morris way details how they have intentionally shaped marketing.
Mm.
It is a incredibly comprehensive and overwhelming book, but the way Lipsky goes about it, rather than following the fact, rather than like pounding you with facts or following like a typical nonfiction argument, he focuses on characters. So there's like a whole chapter on Thomas Edison. And it is the most personal and I think um real feeling look at Thomas Edison I've ever seen. There's a whole chapter on Nicholas Tesla, and it's the most genuine and like authentic chapter on him ever. And he does it all the way through. He takes climate scientists, he looks at them, he takes the oil and gas industry and looks at individuals, and plotting it through individuals in a narrative way makes it really, really powerful. I was blown away. It
Uh,
was excellent
yeah, I
writing.
don't think it was you I heard talking about it. I think it was Ezra Klein. Um,
Oh, really? I didn't
yeah.
listen. Yeah.
Uh, but which to tie back to what you were talking about with what I was talking about with memoir with
Hmm.
making about people, like it's the Michael Lewis
Yeah, he does Michael
strategy.
Lewis style.
My
Yeah.
God, the Big Short. Like if
Hmm.
he started the Big Short explaining what a credit default swap was, I would be
I'd
done.
never read it. Yeah.
But instead, he starts with these descriptions of these fascinating people, and then just sort of
Yeah.
rolls
Just
it in.
dives in.
It's a great technique. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe you
That
should maybe that could help you a bit.
that may be why I like it, because I also love Michael Lewis and I've read everything he's ever written. So that's probably why I
Yeah.
like.
So
But
just sit
yeah,
down, pretend you're Michael Lewis,
and just
and write that
investigate
memoir.
my own life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Solved.
solved, done. Now I
Next
just have to
question.
execute. It's over. Um, I'll get ChatGPT to do it for me now that I know what I want. Write a memoir about my life in the voice of Michael Lewis. But don't tell anybody I ask you to do that. Okay. Number three, question three. Story you consumed recently that was broken.
Oh, I do have something for this. I had
Oh,
said that I didn't
nice.
have anything else, but since between when I answered these questions and tonight is just a couple hours ago, I watched the first episode of Ahsoka, which she's my favorite character.
Yeah, mine too.
And
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it looked beautiful. The characterizations were great. The dialogue was terrible and slow. I wanted to watch the entire episode on 1.5.
Hmm. It's
That
very slow.
and what's weird is Dave Filoni directed it, and he directed most of Rebels, which Rebels didn't
Which is
have that.
very plucky and fun.
Yeah, Rebels. I mean, Rebels was
Yeah.
basically Firefly, which is why I loved it so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the
And I,
casting was great. It looked good.
yeah, it's
Uh,
beautiful. But there's a lot of moments where I'm like, I'm up to date on the episodes, and there's a lot of moments where I'm like, y'all need to pick up the pace on this.
yeah, and it's not just that it's slow; it's that someone will say something
Hmm.
like this,
Yeah.
and then they all kind of look at each other, almost like, "Is it your line now?"
Yeah.
Just yeah, and it was confusing to me.
Like, are you guys stalling for time? Like, what's happening? What's happening here? Like, are you like trying to take up more time in this thing? Yeah, but there's also, and I again, I love it, and I'll watch the whole thing. But I'm like, I agree with you. It's ponderous, and I'm like, this isn't good ponderous. Like
Yeah,
Rebels was great because it wasn't ponderous.
yeah,
This is
and
too ponderous.
the the whole, and I'm not a huge Star Wars geek, so like I haven't read any of the books or anything, just the
Yeah, no, I haven't either.
shows.
Yeah,
But like that story arc in Clone Wars where Ahsoka gets accused of a crime and then gets cleared, and they're like,
yeah,
"Oh, come on back," and she's like, "Screw you
yeah.
guys."
This is great.
That was very not Star Wars
Yeah,
to me. I mean, a lot of or it was what's a breath of air that Star Wars needed, because Star Wars has always been very much about like stick
yeah,
to the path.
yeah,
And she was like, "Yeah, I'm a check, please."
yeah.
And
But she's kind of in the show, she's kind of back on the path, which
Mhm.
makes me kind of sad.
Yeah,
So yeah, anyway. I watched The Menu. Have you watched The
I
Menu?
haven't seen it. No,
It's fantastic.
I've heard like come for the performances.
The performances are amazing. I thought the plot was actually surprising and interesting. The ending is broken. The lead character, I'm not going to tell you who the lead character is, but the lead character learns nothing
Mm.
and has no change. They just do something clever. And by doing something clever, the plot is resolved. And part of me is like, this is broken. But the performances, again, like the character voices are so great. And it's another weird mash of genres where it's pretending to be a cooking show, where they like zoom in on the dishes and the cooking, and they like pop the dish up and they give you like the ingredients, and like, and that becomes darker and darker as they actually use that to like make it like super dark as it goes through, because it's a horror movie. So like as you're
Oh.
increasing in it, it's horror. But usually in a horror movie, the like, ideally the character that's going to escape the monster has to learn something to escape the monster.
Or they have to remain uncorrupted.
Yeah, or they have to remain uncorrupted.
One
This
of the two.
character does neither. They are corrupted and they learn nothing, and they just kind of get out for being clever. And I was like, oh. And then they sit at the end of the movie, they have a shot where this character kind of sits and ponders the thing. And I was like, this shot only works. Like this last scene only works if she learned something.
Right.
She learned nothing. So this
Like The Conversation. Do you remember the movie The Conversation from the 70s? You ever see that?
yes, yeah, with Gene
It was,
Hackman.
yeah, it was part of the
Yeah.
whole sort of Cold War paranoia, but it
Yeah.
ends with him just like sitting in the room knowing that people have been listening to him and he just sits
And he
there.
can't do anything about it.
No.
He destroys his house and he's
Yeah.
just sitting there. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay, question 4. Uh Questions or challenges you faced as an editor recently?
Um I'm struggling with billing.
Okay.
Um as I it's I just the whole the beautiful thing about indie publishing was that anyone could publish a book, which is also the terrible thing. But um, I want to get paid,
Mm-hmm.
but when you think about how much time it takes to really pull apart and edit a book, it's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money, and
Yeah.
I'm wincing as I hand people bills, and they're like, "Oh, that's no problem," which then makes me think, are these the clients?
Yeah.
These the people that I wish to serve, to say to quote Seth Godin. But
Yeah.
like, and in some ways, the old traditional publishing system in some ways served people without means better than everyone thinks of the indie as the DIY, but in a lot of ways, apart from the ridiculousness of gatekeepers,
Yeah.
they would take a author's work and they would help them make it a better work without any further sort of obligate without that author needing
Yeah.
to pony the money.
I think that system would work much better if the world wasn't so misogynist and racist and
Yes.
homophobic. Yeah.
And the
So,
publishing world, which has learned
yeah.
almost nothing.
And it is just a microcosm of the world, right? Like
Yeah.
you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, of course this was a good old boys network. That's what the world was at that time too. Yeah, I feel that pain too, and I'm constantly with the dialogue doctor, I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to like, how can we create something that I as an author can afford? Because there's a
Yeah.
point where I was like, when I was writing my first books, I would not be able to afford my own services. And it's a weird,
Yeah.
striking moment.
And I
Yeah.
mean, you're sort of working on that by looking at something that had like the 78-day dash that,
It's $79.
but those for $79. Um, but
Yeah.
the work that I'm good at, I don't know. I wouldn't mind doing some teaching, but the work that I'm really good at is telling someone why this particular
Yeah,
story
it's time
does
consuming.
not work.
And reading somebody's book is a big effort. It's a big deal. Yeah, it's actually one of the reasons I started the podcast was I was like, because when I was starting as an indie author, we had negative money in our bank account and I couldn't afford anything. You and I were talking earlier about how
Mm.
I've only had health insurance for like 5
Yeah.
years. So, so like but I would obsess over people's free stuff. If somebody put out a blog, I like on craft, I was reading that thing every day. If somebody was like podcasts, I was like obsessing over them. And so I do take comfort in like, okay, there is ways to do this where you don't have to spend a massive amount of money. It's much harder.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is that what you're doing is a twofer in that, I mean, realistically, one point of the podcast is to find clients,
Yeah.
but there's this overspill effect of anybody can listen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're right. It's like driving up to a parking meter that still has time on it. It's
Yeah.
it's great,
Yeah.
right? Like somebody else is paying for Jeff to have the time to do this
To do
podcast.
this podcast. Yeah.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
but um,
Yeah. No. And I'm very thankful for my clients. I think they're amazing and I love working with them. I think, and you know, they're putting my kids through college right now, which is I'm very grateful for that. But it is, yeah, it is it's a tough road, man. I don't have a good answer for it besides just to say, I feel your pain. It sucks. It's like, I wish we lived in a utopia where I could do this stuff for free for people.
and my big shift over the last year and a half or two has been to move from people who can afford it, who just have always wanted a book written and published,
Yeah.
to people who can afford it, who are really trying to improve their craft,
Yeah.
because that is at least rewarding
Yeah.
for for me. It makes me feel less like I'm just doing somebody's.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody asked me once, what would I do if I had John Grisham money? And I was like, the first thing that came to mind was like, I would put on a kick-ass East Coast craft conference and make it free for everybody.
It's so funny you say that, because my first thought was I would retire and do nothing, but I had a very similar thought this past spring when uh, we went on a walk at this place, maybe 50 miles from here, that's in the middle of the New Hampshire woods, and it's a conference center, and it's used mostly for corporate. Uh,
Yeah.
and I just thought, how fun would it be to bring all the people in our online circles to a place like this that
Yeah.
has like Andy Goldsworthy sculptures in the middle of the woods?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was just an amazing, amazing place.
Well, I hear all
Uh,
the time, like I was at a at a hanging out at a bar recently for hanging out with writers, and I was talking to this one guy who had just gotten back from Iowa and had been on a paid like writers in residence at a university in Iowa. And I was like, man, I would love to start some. I wish I had enough money to start something like that in Baltimore, where I could just like pay like writers to like, hey, just come live here for a year and
yeah,
let's figure out your book. Um, yeah, anyway.
that'd be great.
Yeah. Um, we've already talked about my question, which
Genre.
is, yeah, genre, which is a lot of like, I'm talking to a lot of writers right now who are like, I have a book in my head that I want to write, but I still feel this pressure to follow genre conventions. And I don't know what to tell them. I don't know whether to be like,
I tell them no one's going to read your book. No, I'm serious. You know what? And Becca Syme said almost the same thing
yeah,
in that thing. We've talked about this before. Like I have shifted my whole, people are like, is it any good? Which is a horrible question, because who knows?
that's
But
a relative question.
it's
Is it any good is a
my
relative question.
I have changed how I describe my work, which is to help you make the novel that you want to write.
Yeah,
I'm not here to help you make a novel that's gonna hit
gonna
every
sell.
genre trope and sell, because it's not gonna. It's
Yeah,
if you do, it's just like getting hit by lightning.
yeah,
Um, it's it's like being hit by lightning if the equivalent to writing a book is like going outside in a
yeah,
thunderstorm, right? Like if you don't go outside in the thunderstorm, you're not going to get hit by lightning. If you don't write
yeah,
the book, you're not going to have a runaway bestseller. But just
yeah.
because you write the book,
Doesn't mean you get hit by lightning. Yeah,
yeah, you're not
yeah,
gonna.
yeah,
Or you have to assume you're not going to. And again, it's especially poignant because I sort of came into this in that 2018 period where I was like, wow, people are actually making a living doing this. And I would say even now, there's probably more people making a living indie publishing than there are trad publishing.
Yeah.
Nobody gets that. Nobody realizes that
Yeah.
90% of what Random House publishes sells less than 5,000 copies. That
Yeah.
the number of people who actually make their living writing fiction with the big houses, you can almost, you know, put on a basketball team.
Yeah.
There's but that still doesn't mean anyone makes money. Like if
Yeah.
10 times as many people in indie publishing make money than in trad publishing, you're still talking about
A football
in
team.
the thousands of people. Well, you're talking about in the football team, but you're talking about in the
Yeah.
thousands of people, which sounds like a lot, except that there's 3 million books published a year,
Yeah.
and maybe 1,000 of those books are making good money. And I'm not
Yeah.
here to. You're sighing. I'm not here to depress you,
You're making
but
me sad, Tom. I'm gonna stop listening to
it's
you too.
write. Write the book you want to write.
Yeah. It's one of those like, and I feel the problem I have is that like I don't want to tell people. I don't know. Like I'm kind of like, yeah, I feel like the gold rush is dead. I feel like genre conventions were part of the gold rush. It was genre conventions exist because Amazon needed to put your book on a digital shelf, and you needed to get into also bots, like other people's also bots, and you needed to get into when Amazon started doing like bestseller lists, you needed to get into the right bestseller list, all that kind of stuff. And part of me is like, that's what used to get you, at least give you hope of getting noticed. But part of me is like, yeah, but that's done. Like I everything in me, in my gut is like, that doesn't work anymore. That's not real. But then I don't have any evidence and I don't have any data of that.
I
So
think if you
I
looked at
don't
the
want to
data,
say that to people.
you would probably find that there is still a huge swath of readers that want a very particular thing,
Yeah.
and they reward people who produce
For
that
running the
very
market.
particular
Yeah.
thing, and um and that's not generally what I read, which is why I have to be extra careful when I'm editing to be like, I
Yeah.
can't just
That's
make
my
the
problem too.
I can't make your book into the book I want to
Yeah.
read, because then you've got a book that only Tom wants to read. Although
Yeah.
sometimes I'm surprised when we um, next question is about stuff we've read lately, and uh, I've read two things that I thought nobody but me is going to like this, that were both big bestsellers. So,
What were they?
well, last year, yeah, let's just go to question 5. See,
Yeah.
let's get
Question
out of the
5.
depressing
Oh
stuff.
man. Yeah, it's
Through
the
that,
worst. I just
you're
want it
all going to
noted that I
be
have talked about
bestsellers.
climate change and I've
Yeah.
talked about the industry and I've talked about marketing. I'm hitting all of the most depressing topics today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have studio. You keep trying to bring up Chat GPT. And I'm like, I'm not talking about it.
I'm goading you. No, I'm
It's
not actually. I'm really
yeah.
not.
Uh, the oh yes, I didn't really bring you a question, which is fine because we're at like 3 hours and 20
Are
minutes
we
right
really? I don't even know
now.
what time it
No,
is.
we're not.
Okay.
It just feels like it.
It doesn't. It feels like we're just having a good conversation. I just stuck
5A,
it down.
but yes.
Yeah.
A couple things that I've been thinking about, and one is we've talked a lot about in book groups and other things the way in which books that are, largely dialogue are also the sort of best regarded in a lot of ways, and because the easiest way to provide an emotional journey is with dialogue. Except I keep encountering books that aren't that, and it's like,
Yeah.
are they the exception to the rule, or am I the exception to the rule? Like, does that book work for me? So one was last year reading Hamnet, which has almost no dialogue,
Yeah.
and is one of the most beautiful books I've read,
Yeah.
and just made me weep. Um, and I just last week read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow
I
by
haven't read that
Gabrielle
one.
Zevin, which it's been on the bestseller list. This is what caused this question. It's like, because
Yeah.
I'm reading this book and I'm like, this book seems written specifically for me. How is it on the bestseller list? It had a good amount of dialogue, but it also had lots and lots of narrative,
Yeah.
sort of like inside the characters' heads. It's about a young man and a boy and girl who become friends and then grow up to be friends as college students and start creating video games together.
Oh wow.
Um, and uh, Rachel Herron had someone on her podcast who was talking about how both times they've read Gabrielle Zevin, which was this book, and The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery, how they had to go back and be like, how did she just do that? Like,
Yeah.
there's something going on here that's making me love this book, and I can't figure out what it is. And I don't know
Yeah.
what the answer is, but that was interview was enough to make me say like, oh, I'm going to read that book
Yeah.
now. And that's why I finally picked it up. And she does some stunningly beautiful things in the book. Um, but it still seems like an outlier, and yet it's on the bestseller list. So there's got to be an audience out there for the people who aren't just sticking to the thing that they know.
Yeah. I think it's this is a new analogy for me in like the last probably 4 months. I've started thinking of craft more like cooking and less like rules. Because like, do salt and butter and sugar make something taste better? Yes.
Yeah.
Like that, there's not a question. You add salt, you add butter, you add sugar, it makes it taste better. Can you have too much salt, butter, and sugar? Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. Or
And
can you have that every day?
yeah, I got, and I've, there's people I've worked with where they send me their stuff and I'm like, this has too much dialogue. Like, it's too much. You've gone too far. So, because there's no, and the thing is, there's no moments of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my fault because they've been listening to me. I'm like, I've been preaching butter and you handed me a sculpture of butter. And now I'm like too much butter and I feel like a jerk. But it's I think of it more as like, can you cook something delicious with no butter, salt, and sugar? Well, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it harder? Yeah. But can you do it? Absolutely. Like, and that's kind of how I started thinking about craft is like, yeah, strong characters, growth arcs, character interactions, quote, like, or AKA dialogue all through the work. That is butter, salt, and sugar, right? Like, can you
Mm-hmm.
cook me something amazing? Can you write me a book that has no character interactions that I will still be absorbed with? Sure, Kurt Vonnegut does it all the time, right? Like, and in the middle of the book, there's a weird hand-drawn picture of a penis.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have even anything to do with the book. I'm like, why is this illustration here? I don't know, but for some reason it's charming, and I can't figure out why. But it's like, yeah, it's not a. There's not. This is more of an art than It's an art with rules, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's an art, and there's not even rules. It's an art with expectations. It's like when somebody goes to a restaurant, they expect to eat something delicious and they have an idea of what delicious is, but you can absolutely surprise them. And I think that's part of what you're talking about is like, these people are breaking rules and this is delightful. And it doesn't really make sense to me because I'm like, it should have a lot of butter in
Right.
it. And it doesn't. And could I
It,
repeat it at home? Probably
yeah.
not. Like,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
kind of why I gravitate toward in writing. Uh, I gravitate towards first person. I mean, neither of those books are in first person, but I like that first person provides both or can provide both constant dialogue because you're creating a voice that you're
yeah,
telling the story in. It can provide almost constant dialogue, but at the same time, it's a natural way to say what the character is thinking because
yeah,
they're telling you their story, so they're telling you what they're
yeah.
thinking. Um, and it sort of avoids some of the ponderousness of third person where you're like, wait, whose head am I in now? And
Yeah, what's happening? Why are we jumping
right.
around? Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so uh
Yeah, I don't know. I'll combine you had another number five.
oh yeah,
Your
my other
second number
number
five.
five. This is more upbeat. I've been thinking a lot because everyone's coming up with a theorem. I feel like I need a theorem. Uh
Nice.
my own. No, just kidding. But I was thinking about idioms, or not idiomatic expressions, but the sort of what makes a different media specifically itself. Um, and I had a way back when I was in college, which was 30 years ago now, I had a photography teacher who was really into this and had all these crazy activities like we did. Like one was drawing a tree on a paper towel with a magic marker. And the magic marker and the paper towel are going to have a large influence on what your tree looks like.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And you can embrace it or you can fight it.
Yeah.
Um, photography has lots of influences on what your the the limitations. It's got a square
Yep.
border, right? It's gonna have framing. You can't decide what how big
Yeah.
or small that framing is going to be. It's going to have contrast, depth of field, that sort of thing. And like we on one of the on one of your podcasts or one of your interviews or somewhere, someone we were talking about how to show people talking at the same time in a novel. And like how you look at Deadlock, and there are these brilliant scenes with like four people talking at once,
Yeah.
and that's part of what makes the scene brilliant. And I just came to the conclusion, like, that is a scene for television,
Yeah. It's
right?
something
Like
that they
that's
have, they
not
beat us. Yeah.
right. They beat us.
Yeah.
And for like making movies out of novels has always been stupid, has
Yeah.
always been stupid. And now you see streaming services making 8-10 episode versions of novels. It's so much more sense. It'll not, because the idiom of the world of the movie, the mechanics of the movie were never right for telling a 350-page
Yeah.
story. They never were. Something's always gutted. Um, so you know, so when you're writing, like, and again, I think the sort of first person narrative, that ability to be inside the character's head is unique. You can do a voiceover in a movie, everybody hates it. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Unless, but
um,
again, it's that recipe thing. Like, unless it's done
right.
in an
And
artful and creative way
yeah,
that you're like, oh, yeah, that actually kind of works.
right. Yeah, like Fleabag turning and talking to the camera,
Yeah.
like,
Or like
totally works.
Tarantino has one in oh, what's the stupid movie he made about Hollywood and the Manson murders? I can't
Oh, I
remember.
haven't seen that one. I think
Once
that's the
Upon a
only one of
Time in
his I haven't
Hollywood.
seen. Yeah.
He has a voiceover in Hollywood and it works great. It actually, when
Right.
it shows up, it's actually really funny. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is entertaining. Yeah.
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 But yeah, if you're I just think if you're writing a novel instead of a screenplay, you should be leaning into the things that are
Yeah.
novelish.
Yeah. That's a
Um,
good,
it's
I
just an
like that.
excuse for why I can't write dialogue like Deadlock has. Because how would
Yeah.
you even do it? Would you have would you have columns?
I'm
Because
trying to
I've seen
think
that
of,
for Hamilton. They did that when the when we were watching Hamilton on Disney
yeah.
Plus or whatever, and they had column like 3 or 4 columns, because there's
Yeah.
parts where 3 or 4 people are all singing at the same time.
Yeah.
Uh,
You could do columns. Like, we were looking at the screenplay for Inside Out. That's when we
that's
were
what it
talking about
was.
this.
Yeah, that's
And
what it
in
was.
their screenplay, they had columns of like all the characters talking at one time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm thinking about I may get this wrong. I may be thinking of the wrong novel because it's been a couple years, but I read Funny Girl. Funny Girl? Maybe it's a Nicholas Hornby novel. And
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, I know.
it's not Funny Girl. You know what I'm talking about though?
Yep, it
Yeah,
might be Funny Girl.
it might be Funny Girl. He has a scene, he has a repeated scene in the book where there's two comedy writers, the main character and a producer, and they're having conversations. And the way he does it is nobody finishes a sentence, but they're all talking on top of each
Right.
other. And I thought that was done well. I was impressed by how he did that.
And that is called Funny Girl, and that's how I do it too with M dashes. But
Yeah.
like, you try to put a third person in there, and it gets really hard. You try to put a fourth person in, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. What made it work was the writers in the scene had very distinct voices.
Mm-hmm.
So you always knew when one of them was talking. So it was kind of like, and then the producer doesn't talk very much. So it's kind of like, man, I can't even remember the lead character's name. It was her and the two writers going back and forth, and then the fourth guy would kind of insert himself every once in a while, and it worked well. That book has major plot problems, but it worked well. That those repeated scenes were fun. Um, yeah. Okay, last question. Now that we're 7 hours in,
Yeah.
um, and this is my question. I'm going to combine my issues and problems I'm pondering with my question for you.
Okay.
Something Becca Syme says in that podcast, it is true. One of the dialoguers asked, how did Becca manage to get her name like Cher has her name, where we use one name, everybody knows exactly who we're talking about. One thing, I'm keep calling her Becca, even though she and I have met once over Zoom. I don't even right to call her Becca. Anyway, one thing Becca said in that thing was start thinking about your career in decades and stop thinking about it in months or years. So my question for you is, what does your career look like in decades?
Be perfectly honest,
You're like, I got
yeah,
4 months left, Jeff, and then I'm out.
yeah, no, I just I don't want to. I enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a part of me that feels like what I am doing with writing multiple, I'm on book my eighth novel, although they're short. They're not like, inside out side. And they're written under a pen name for various reasons.
Yeah.
But I feel like somewhere in my future, be it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, is the great American novel that I could not, that kept me from writing between the ages of 20 and 45.
Interesting.
I literally did not write a novel between the ages of 20 and 45 because every time I
It's
stared
hiding
at a
in there
screen,
somewhere.
I was like, this is not going to be any good.
Yeah.
This is not going to be any good. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm slowly chipping away at that voice that keeps
Nice.
me from trying to do something more
Yeah.
bigger. And at this, I'm chipping away at it by improving my craft, and I'm chipping away at it by realizing that by the time I do it, no one's going to read books anymore. So, so
It's not true.
the pressure is off.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
we've talked about this already this evening, but like career, I don't know if there is a career in terms of a writing career.
Man, we
Um,
are so dark this time.
unless you know, I mean, I could do like,
Hope
but
Horizon? There
you
is
know,
no horizon.
yeah, the um, I'm thinking of both Becca Syme and boy, my brain is fried. Sasha Black, in terms of like they've got a really nice series of nonfiction writing books that is sort of forming a body of work that Sasha, I think, is currently having some good success under a pen name, but
Yeah.
in both cases, like it is eclipsing their fiction work.
Yeah.
Um, and probably for good reason, because I think the opportunity to build a career on author advice is probably greater percentage of success than building a career on writing fiction.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting concept. I went with the question a different way because I was like, well, if I stop thinking about having to make money on the next book and I start thinking about what's my long-term goal. I've been writing for 10 years. My 10-year fiction anniversary is coming up in November. It'll be 10 years since I published my first novel.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I've written 14 books, and if I count the dialogue doctor book in that number. And so part of me is like, I wonder, if I've got another, I'm 46, if I've got another 30 years in me, I wonder if I can get up to 50 novels. Like that would be fun. But yeah, I don't know. That's what I was kind of thinking. The problem with that kind of long-term thinking though is that I'll start to cheat my goal and I'll write like 10,000 word things and call them a novel.
Yeah.
And be like, I got 50 in a year. Yeah.
But I think there is a value. Again, in 50, you might write 50 novels, but you'll be writing them for yourself because AI will be writing all the ones that people read. The um they're horrible now. Okay, I'm going to talk about ChatGPT.
Don't do it. Don't. We've
The
done the
Facebook
whole time.
groups.
We haven't talked about it. We haven't
the
talked about it.
Facebook groups where they talk about the hours that they spend caressing the inputs to get the outputs. I'm like, just write the book, man.
It's just a different type of writing. People
It's
enjoy
but
different things. Yeah.
yeah, like, and I use it for brainstorming, but it's like the time investment in trying to get the output that they want at this stage.
Yeah.
5 years from now, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
uh,
I think about like I've been doing this weird deep dive into movie directors for the last year and a half, which I don't know why I'm doing. But as I've done it, it's been interesting to read like biographies and watch the movies of like Stanley Kubrick and then read like, stuff about David Fincher or stuff about um, just these other Nora Ephron, these other writer directors. They're so different in how they approach what they do. Radically different. And they do radically different jobs. Like the job that Kubrick was doing doesn't really look like how other people do the job.
mhm.
But they're all directors. And that's kind of where I've come with writing. I'm like, if you where you're finding joy is project managing AI tools, do that. If you're finding joy in sitting down every night and writing, 2 to 3,000 words, and you hate planning, do that. Like, if you if you're finding joy in planning and you want to hand it to somebody else to ghostwrite, like do that. Like, do that. And I'm not gonna there's space in my definition of writer to encompass all of those people.
Yeah, I would agree with
Yeah.
that. I think there's people out there who would think it's a shortcut and are ironically spending more time
There is a there
trying
is
to
a
figure it out than.
there is a deep hope that this will reignite the gold rush. I
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, there's a
I
deep
like
hope
how
that
we've
this will
gotten
reignite the
through
gold
line
rush.
to
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
conversations.
This is why we're such excellent talkers, Tom.
We
Oh,
planned it all out.
if only people would listen to the whole thing, they would see our brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, and I feel I have been on that like, oh, the way to reignite the gold rush is that I'm gonna write faster and publish
Yeah.
more, and it burned me out for a year. And so like I get that, like I understand that desire, and more power if you can do it, more power to you. I don't think it will, but you know, if you make $1 million cranking out 100 books this year using Chat GPT, send me an email and say I did it, and I will buy you a beer and
Yeah.
tell you great
And
job.
I would spend a year doing it if I thought I could get $1 million, because then I could write my own novels slowly
then,
with
then you
no other
could
work.
then you could give up and write
Uh,
your A Great American Novel.
Last thing I will say on the Becca Syme question about careers is that it would be very gratifying to be known for a specific aspect of the industry.
Hmm.
And she's built that
Oh
on
yeah,
Clifton Strengths, which is great. You
yeah,
you don't think Clifton Strength and authors without thinking.
yeah,
And I would love, if I would love if somewhere in part of the country people are putting on a writing conference and they're like, we need someone to talk about, you know, prepping for a novel,
yeah.
or
And they're like, call Tom. Yeah,
how character flaw and the third act fit together.
yeah.
Whatever. It would be very
Whatever it is.
that
Yeah,
would be something to aspire to over the next 10,
yeah,
20 years, is to
yeah. That
be
would be fun.
known
Yeah,
as the person
yeah.
who really
Totally.
knows.
Yeah, yeah. That would be fun. I also the another, and
You're
this
already
is
there, man.
I don't ain't no conferences calling me.
They should be.
Um, that's I agree. Y'all better get on that. Uh, I think another thing that I'm really pondering when it comes to my career is I used to want to be McDonald's. Like I used to want to be like the internationally known John Grisham, novels everywhere. But now I'm kind of the place where I'm like, what if just people in my immediate area know me? Am I okay with that? Like, am I okay with not being Barnes and Noble and just being the Ivy Bookshop, which is a bookshop down the road for me? That's fantastic. I love going there. It's wonderful. Nobody outside of Baltimore knows about the Ivy Bookshop, but part of me is like, I wonder if I'm okay selling local for the rest of my life and not having to play
Yeah.
this stupid Amazon game.
And
Like,
there was a Becca Syme referred to a person on that podcast who like does all local stuff now because they
yeah,
got tired of the ad game. I would agree with you if it included like online groups because I don't really want to meet anybody.
yeah. And see, I'm the opposite. I'm to a place in life right now where I'm like, I'd much rather sit across from you than online. That's kind of where I don't know. That's just my weird introverted personality that also likes people that
I'm
will
that way
torture
too,
me
except that I
forever.
want to already know them.
Yeah, I'm that way too. I don't like
So
the first conversation. So I need only people I know
yeah,
to
that's
buy
totally
my
different.
books.
That's totally different than setting up your table at a local
Yeah,
meet and greet and
yeah.
cold talking to 100
Oh,
people who walk by. That's not my.
the only way I could do it was to motivate myself by being like, I'm helping other authors do this too. That's the only way I
I
could
thought you were going
motivate
to say
myself to do it.
alcohol.
Well, that as well. I did stay away from that though, because I had two in me after 3 hours, and I was like, this isn't gonna be good for talking about books. If I'm swaying behind the table. Oh, all right. Well, Tom, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the dialogue dash.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Yeah.
Everything except the writing part. Uh, the before and
Planning's
after.
so fun. Yeah.
I love planning. No, I love planning, and I think I'm good at it because I don't take it too seriously. But like, you got to have direction, man. Then you can change direction all you
Yeah.
want, but you
You
can't
can
change
chat
direction if you
GPT it,
don't
Tom.
know.
You don't
You
have to
can,
write it. JP's actually writing, so he's writing plot prompts that like what you're gonna do is you're gonna lay out these are the kind of the 30 scenes I think I want to write
Mhm.
over the next 30 days in whatever order. And he's writing a prompt for each scene that you could 100% take and put into GPT.
No,
And you
no
can
way.
chat GPT to,
I'll play with it, but
yeah.
it'd be like John Henry. I will collapse at the end of the
That's
month.
right. Who'll beat it and die
Uh,
at the end of the tunnel. It's really
uh,
funny.
but I'm interested in the. I mean, it's going to be December, so I'm going to be toast because it's
Yeah.
Christmas time. But um, I am really good at telling people how to revise their work. I am crap at revising my own work. I'm like, yes, fine,
Interesting.
it's good,
It's good.
we're
That's
fine.
funny.
We're at 80%. Let's ship.
Yeah.
We're good.
That's really
Um,
funny.
and I know that I would be better off uh for having some of the tools that Laura has laid out in terms of like really
Yeah.
going through a manuscript.
Yeah.
I appreciate and I applaud, and I don't personally use, and this will be a chance to do it.
Yeah. All right.
I just the way it is right now, my wife reads it, and if she's like this is bad, then I fix it.
oh, I was gonna,
And that's it.
yeah, I thought you were gonna say, then I publish it.
No, no,
I
she's
write it.
impeccable taste.
Yeah. I write it and I read it and I'm like, this is garbage. There's no way to fix it. And then I publish it. It's hopeless. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah,
I have to publish it now.
Seth said ship it, so I'm gonna ship it.
That's told me to ship it. All right, I'm going to
All
turn
right.
the recording off. We can talk a
Yeah.
little bit
Have a
more.
good night.